Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another free Real Estate Advice Friday, episode number 57. Multi offers are back. We'll get into that in a second. There's a lot to be had there. The conversation's obviously meant to grab people's attention, but definitely a lot to be talked about there. Um, Before I do that, I want to go ahead and plug some businesses like I always do and excuse all my devices beeping. It's that time of year for real estate. So, two things I want to plug this week. So number one is Salvatore Plumbing and Heating. I'm sure a lot of people that watch this fairly regularly know Salvatore Heating and Plumbing, because a lot of us went to high school with Rob and know him fairly well. But I want to plug this business because I've actually used Rob a lot over the years, with not just with clients in real estate, but also just my house in general. Um, Generally, when I call Rob, and I'm sure Rob is very used to this, but it's usually pretty time sensitive. It could be a deal that's, it's like the last thing before we close, or it could be a home inspection negotiation issue, which are usually time sensitive. In my own case, this was a water heater that went. And so I have to consult with Rob a lot. And especially when it's with clients, like I can't guarantee to Rob that they're actually going to, use him for the work. So that's always kind of a caveat to any time I call him. And, I'm sure Rob is always aware of that. But, I like to at least give him the chance at doing business. But our water heater went this week, and we got a quote from our heating oil provider because we have a service contract with them. And came out very quickly and gave us a quote, and for a few reasons I wasn't very confident in that quote for some very specific reasons. So I called Rob right away, sent him over the information on the water heater that we currently had. He called me right back, literally in seconds. Asked me a few questions about our usage and the model itself, and we went over everything. He immediately beat their price. They were over there in 48 hours, which was actually better than the estimate I got from the previous service provider. And as of today, we have hot water again. So I just want to, always give Rob a shout out. Rob is an absolute expert. A lot of times I'm asking about pretty complicated things, and he's always very quick to be helpful and give me, really good expertise in areas that I definitely don't know much about. I'm relatively handy, but, there's definitely a limit to my knowledge in some of those areas. So Salvatore Plumbing and Heating. I'll put a link in the comments to his Facebook page. But if you ever need someone locally in Hunterdon, Warren, I don't know exactly how far Rob goes, but if you need someone to help you out with the plumbing and heating realm, then definitely give him a call. And actually, let's get that link up right now. And then other than that, let's see what else. Give me 1 second to get this link up here. I'm sure people have questions about what's going on in the market because it's all over the place right now. But all right, so here's a link to Rob's Facebook page. Rob's in Glen Gardner. I don't know how far they go. I know he was telling me they were doing some stuff in Warren County, but he's obviously here in Hunterdon. So you're pretty good with most of the areas of people that generally watch this cast. But I know we do have viewers everywhere. So, but that's Hunterdon County, New Jersey, and probably the surrounding areas. But yeah, give Rob a call if you need someone. The other thing I want to plug is my Philadelphia Eagles, who are in the Super Bowl this week, and nothing other than to be proud of them and wish them luck this week. I am been trying to distract myself all week. I'm a diehard Eagles fan, and it's been it's been really tough in the back of my mind having this cloud over me that I shouldn't say cloud. I'm psyched that they're there, but yeah, I'm very invested in it. So I'm trying to distract myself with as much as I can to, it's a long wait till Sunday at 6:30 to kick off. So, if you're watching, you're a Birds fan, go Birds. If not, I'm sorry. I know this New Jersey area is very polarizing in that aspect. We got a lot of Giants fans in this area and a lot of Jets fans and other fans. So anyway, go Birds. So let's get into real estate. So listen, I said last week that things are getting a little crazy in the market. That is continuing for sure. My phone is definitely ringing off the hook. Probably about, I'm probably at about 30 buyers and 10 to 12 sellers currently as active clients, all in various timelines, obviously, that are out there doing it. I did get an offer accepted last week, 9 offers, and we won the bid. We were not the highest offer. I think we just offered the best package. As I say in most of my platforms, I do have a very distinct way that I submit my offers that has been very successful for me in the past. I don't want to get into all the specifics on this very public platform, but I am happy to share that with you. In fact, if you do put in an offer with me, you'll actually see how it's submitted. I just forward it to you. But there's a lot of elements to it, not to mention all the negotiation that goes on behind the scenes. This week we had, I submitted 2 offers, one accepted, one not accepted. The one that was not accepted was beat by a cash offer. I mean, it was actually a pretty high price point. I mean, there's not always cash offers on high price points. That's, just not as common, but it's hard to beat those when you need to. But that's fine. We'll move on to the next one. I'll continue preaching this as I have for the past 2 years. If you're in the market right now, you're trying to buy a house, don't fall in love with anything until I tell you offer accepted. Maybe not even fall in love until I say under contract, because things can get a little squirrely out there right now with multi-offer situations, depending on how it's handled by the listing agent. And again, these are all very specific conversations that pertain to each property, and those are things that I'll definitely look to inform you on if you're working with me. But the one that was accepted, we were not the highest offer. We did offer a few things that kind of made our offer pretty airtight, and got the confidence of the seller properly. That we're not doing anything that's egregious or shady. That's definitely not how I do business. Everything is on the up and up, and that is actually a big reason that I'm able to get offers accepted. It doesn't just go to my professional relationships. Obviously, I as a pretty active realtor in this area, I know a ton of realtors. So if they see an offer come in from me, I want them to be confident that this transaction is going to be handled smoothly. And I hope they, relay that message to their sellers that, oh, I've worked with Craig before. He's great. He will keep on top of things. There will be no concerns, no red flags. And the reason that's important is because when you're putting in an offer, if you're a listing agent or a buying agent or whatever, there is definitely something to understanding where the other agent is at in their career, in the way they do business, their relationship with the sellers. Because if you are dealing with a less experienced agent, a lot of times it turns into a bit of a coaching situation, or where negotiations are tricky because a lot of the things that you're negotiating, the other agent doesn't fully understand them, or gets caught up in aspects of it that really aren't all that important, but they think it's super important. So I have to coach them and say, no, that's not what you should be focusing on. However, you should be focusing on this other thing. So there's a lot of that goes on. And I always make very clear, there's ways we can tell how experienced the other agent is. They're not super reliable. I mean, I'm not a broker or anything. I can ask my broker, but I generally don't. But you can, just as well as anyone watching this can find out how active a realtor is. I can do the same things. So if I get the sense that they may be inexperienced, sometimes generally waiting till we're under contract, I'll just ask straight out, listen, absolutely nothing personal here, but I just want to ask, based on our interaction so far, are you a less experienced agent? And, very often they'll be like, yeah, actually, this is my first. I've done that 3 times in my career. I've literally helped the other agent through their first career transaction. And, and that's totally fine. It's just good to kind of get that out there. So if things pop up where it could potentially go south, we can return to that conversation and say, hey, look, I know we talked about this. Can I tell you about this a little bit? Kind of educate them on what's happening and how it's generally navigated. And then often say things such as, hey, check with your broker just to, fact check me, basically, and say, they can go to the broker afterwards and say, hey, I'm not so sure on this. I did discuss it with the other agent, Craig Metz, and he said this. I just want to make sure that sounds okay to you. All perfectly fine. I mean, that's kind of, how I like to do business, building those relationships with other agents, because, I guarantee you doing something like that is so much more useful than like a confrontational negotiation method. Because the next time I put in an offer with that agent, or they put an offer in with me, there is definitely equity built up there in, just being a professional and being helpful and being a mentor and being a, kind of a beacon in the industry. We all need it at some point in our career. I have a perfect story about this. I mean, the first career transaction that I ever did, it was relatively smooth. I mean, looking back on it, I think I handled it pretty much perfectly. I have a great team behind me at Keller Williams. They were super helpful in, getting me through that first transaction. Real estate transactions are pretty complicated. So, I had a lot of people here at the brokerage supporting me, um, two brokers, and then I had two colleagues also that were kind of keeping an eye on me. A lot of like Sunday night phone calls and questions and stuff like that. So I mean, I know I handled everything really well, except for one thing. I took my lockbox off the listing too early, because I didn't know any better. I was just like, well, they're moving in soon, so I guess I have to take the lockbox off. Obviously, not considering that they need to get in for final walkthrough. And the reason I wasn't considering that is because I had no experience. So it was literally my first sale. So I just didn't think about like how that would work. I guess I thought like they would get the key from the attorney or something like that, but that's generally not how we do it. We leave the lockbox on there and then I get it after it's closed so they can get in for the final walkthrough. And then we actually generally tell the buying agent to just go ahead and take that key and give it to their clients when they close. So in this case, I took the lockbox down early. Now, in this case, the closing happened to be several towns away. It was like 45 minutes away from where the house was. So they go to do the walkthrough. They can't get in the house. I'm at the closing 45 minutes away, and we make this realization. The other agent said, no problem. She gets to me at the closing. She says, you stay here. I'll do the walkthrough for my clients. You stay here at the closing. I'm going to drive back another 45 minutes to do the walkthrough, and I'll call back when I say it's okay. So that's what happened. Her client stayed behind at the closing. I put my tail between my legs. I also stayed at the closing. The other agent drove back to the property, did the walkthrough for him, drove all the way back. I've now, put an extra like hour and a half of driving into this agent's pocket. And she was an experienced agent. She was, and super kind to do that. And she was very clear, everything's been great so far. It's a mistake. It happens to all of us. I realize it's your first transaction because I told her up front it was my first transaction, and everything worked out fine. Years later, this was probably about 3 years later. This was, roughly a year ago now. She put an offer in on one of my listings, and believe me, I remembered that. That was a factor because she was like one of the top 3 or 4 offers on a property I was selling at the time. We had like 24 offers, and she was up in the mix. She was top 3. And believe me, I told my seller, hey, look, I've worked with her before. She's fantastic. I even told them that story. And, I don't want to say that's what won her the offer, but it was definitely a variable to tell my agents like, hey, these other two, I don't know them. I've never talked to them. That's on them. They didn't talk to me before they put their offers in, but I knew her. I knew how she, handled herself professionally. And that transaction actually got fairly complicated because we had a sewer line issue and there were some things that needed to be negotiated. In the grand scheme of things, for an experienced agent, really not that complicated, but it wasn't what I would call like a totally smooth transaction. So I was really glad to have her over there. And I, kind of reminded my sellers like, don't worry, she's taking care of her side, coaching her clients properly, letting them know that they're, what the issues are and what's standard to ask for to get fixed and what would be not standard and so on and so forth. And I could probably tell you like 20 of those stories. That's just the most egregious example. So, building those relationships and conducting yourself in that way is definitely a factor in getting your offers accepted. Now, obviously, on top of that, I have all sorts of other things that I do to make my offer stand out, but that's a big one is just, conducting yourself in the right way, calling the listing agent ahead of time, finding out what the wishes of the sellers are, and then preparing that offer from there with my proprietary way of doing it, and making sure it's airtight. That all goes to that offer acceptance ratio. And I will say, like, over the past, 2.5, 3 years of manic market that we've been in, I think my closing rate is very, very good. So, but those are all factors that, I think they're very, misunderstood by a lot of agents that are just less experienced or just don't think about it or have kind of a skewed way of like how to do negotiation. A lot of times, agents, when in doubt, scream and shout. They get confrontational because they think like that's how it's supposed to be. Particularly with like part-time agents, they see the shows and they see like, oh, agents are like super confrontational and hard negotiators and stuff like that. And you know, there are times when we have to be hard negotiators for sure. But there's appropriate times for that, and it's not like right away, which is can be a problem. I've told the story multiple times on this podcast of a listing that I had that we had, again, 19 offers or something like that, and we took a all cash offer with them waiving everything, no inspection, no appraisal, no nothing. And during attorney review, which we're in New Jersey here, so attorney review is a period in New Jersey, generally 3 to 5 days, where either side can just back out, no questions asked. That's it's one of the things I really actually like about New Jersey and how we do real estate. During that time, the buyers on my listing, who had promised to waive everything, talked to their attorney. They hadn't talked to their attorney before they made that offer. The attorney says, "Are you sure you want to waive all these inspections? Just so you know, this is what this means." And they said, "No, we don't want to do that at all. That doesn't sound good at all." It's not. It's never good to waive inspections. I mean, listen, sometimes we have to do it, but it's definitely not like an advisable idea. It's not something that would ever be recommended. The conversation I've had to have with my own clients has been, I don't recommend that you waive inspections, period. However, I will tell you that if you don't do it, you may not be getting this house. So it is what it is. But I am not recommending that you waive inspections. If you choose to do that, that's up to you. But I want to be very clear, I'm not recommending it. So, and I think you'll have a very similar situation with your attorney. In this case, the buyers had that conversation with their attorney and they came back to their agent and said, "We don't want to waive inspections anymore." Agent calls me. Well, actually, agent didn't call me. Again, very important distinction here. The agent did not call me. I get an email from the agent saying that they're taking away that waiver. I call the agent immediately as soon as I get it, within minutes, and I say, "Hey, what's going on here? I thought you guys were waiving inspection." And she says, "Oh, no, they talked to their attorney and they don't want to do that anymore." I said, "Well, we're going to have to reconsider the offer because largely that's why we took it." So at that point, you have a choice as a buying agent. Your choice is twofold. Number one, put your tail between your legs, admit that it was a mistake and a misunderstanding, and that you'll work on it, and you swear that you'll get it over the finish line. And, immense apologies to the seller because now that the expectations are different, and you hope you can make it work. Is there something else that can be done to make it work? Negotiate, right? You've done something. You've handed us something, and then you've yanked it back from us. You have to make an adjustment. You have to pivot. That's where the negotiation comes into in this industry. But instead, this agent got real confrontational and said, "If you don't like our offer, you don't have to take it." And I said, "Okay, well, that's not my decision, but I'm going to call my seller and tell her how this conversation went." I call my seller. We have a conversation that's just that. I say, "All right, here's what happened." I tell her exactly what happened. And I said, "I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you how the conversation went with the agent." I tell her, she said, "You know what? I don't think that's her client's fault. And I don't want to take this house away from them. So we're going to work with them." Great. I get it. Totally fine. My client was like, an absolute saint. And I understood what she was saying. She's so nice and she wanted to make it work. So I called the agent back and I said, "Hey, we're going to try and make it work." And guess what that agent did at that point? Still with the confrontation, still basically saying, no tail between the legs, just like, completely confrontational and unreasonable. And so much so, and so out of step with like what should have been said. Again, if it were me, I'd be like, "Oh, thank you so much. We are so appreciative of that, and we will definitely make this work, keeping in mind that we did this, our fault, on our side, that we weren't in complete communication on our side. They hadn't talked to their attorney yet. So sorry. We're going to make this work. I promise you from here on out, nothing like this will happen again." That's totally fine. That's not what happened. They were super confrontational again. I said, "You know what? I thought we were going to move forward. I'm going to call my client again and tell him how this conversation went." Again, I call my client back. I say, "I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just going to tell you how this conversation went with the agent." And you know what my client said? "Nah, I don't like how this is going and I'm out." And I said, "That's fine." And we started calling the other offers, and we got another offer in right behind it. Well, we had we were sitting on 18 other offers. So again, if you're thinking about this agent that got themselves in this situation, how do you get yourself in that situation in New Jersey when you're in an attorney review period where at any time the seller can just say, no, we're out. We don't want to deal with this. And there's 18 offers behind it. So, I started calling the other offers, and, we chose one of the other top five and again, I will say it was the agent that we were real comfortable with how they were communicating, how they communicated their clients. They had us call their lender. Was thrilled to be considered, just all the things done correctly. It felt like everyone was working together at that point, and it was a smooth transaction after that. So, the question I would always ask people, if you're working with a buying agent, are you comfortable with that agent, not just in terms of their knowledge, but that they are capable of negotiating and establishing professional relationships? One thing to keep an eye on is if you go to an open house with your agent, keep an eye on how they're interacting with the other agent, because you can get a real good idea of how they negotiate and how they conduct themselves professionally. And if you get a sniff of something that is unprofessional or makes you uncomfortable, a lot of times that's what it is. It makes the clients uncomfortable with how they're conducting themselves with the other agent. If it's just out of step with like how you like to do things, maybe you need to, consider other avenues. And it's a huge factor in our industry, and it's so overlooked. People, the way that a lot of people get agents these days is they go on Zillow and they say, I want to tour this home. And as I've said many times, that's like a lottery system. That's a bid system. Those agents that are getting those calls to give you a tour of that house, first of all, they are expecting your business. And second of all, they're just paying for that placement. It doesn't mean they're good. It doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean they're good. It's basically just a lottery system. So, all these things to keep in mind. So the title of this is Multi-Offers Are Back. And I did that as an attention grabber, obviously, but I will tell you right now, multi-offers never left New Jersey. They just lightened up. So, we back in the, peak COVID days, we had, we were getting anywhere from 10 to 25 offers on like every listing. Rates were at, 2.4%, and the market had gone crazy. And, we had to navigate through that. And, I think any realtor would tell you the talking point we get from the general public is, oh, wow, you're in real estate, you must be doing great. Yeah. I mean, we're doing fine. There's a lot of transactions, but it's super competitive, super cutthroat. And think about the fact that every time I put in an offer, I don't know it's going to get accepted. There's 20 other offers. How do I know if mine's going to get accepted? So it wasn't exactly instilling confidence in terms of making a living. If you had listings, those listings were gold, obviously. So, we tried to get as many listings as possible, but that's like half the story, obviously. And then, of course, anytime you have a market like that, there's going to be a downturn. So it, kind of offsets. But I think what anyone would tell you from that time period is, although all those transactions are great, because, there's X amount of realtors and there's Y amount of transactions. And then, hopefully we get a good percentage of the Y. But I think we'd all tell you balance is key, because, as things settled down and, the multi-offers didn't go away, but it was 3, 4, 5 offers per property instead of 20. Especially someone like me who like really focuses on getting offers accepted. Listen, I'll take the 4 or 5 all day. Whereas, 4 years ago, I would have said if one of my properties had gotten 4 offers, I would have thought something insane happened. Like that never happened. If we got 2 offers, it was considered like a major victory. So, and I can remember when that changed. It was very distinct, because I tell people in the office all the time that are fairly new agents, like for a long time, if you got a client, that was the hard part. And then you got a client and the client said, I want this house. And you'd say, all right, well, let's go find you the house. And then you find the house within a week and they say, all right, let's buy the house. No problem. Piece of cake, right? That lasted, in my career, that lasted for about a year. And we've never gotten back there. I'm not sure we're ever going to, because there was such a housing shortage. So for all of those reasons, that's why it's just super important to make sure that you're working with someone that you're comfortable with, is an expert, has a negotiation style that you're comfortable with. Look for those professional red flags that might be problematic down the road, and they very well could be problematic. Realtors do make choices that submarine deals. And that's a problem, because really, there really shouldn't be a lot of opportunities for the realtor to submarine the deal, but it does happen. So it's, I always describe it like this, again, to like, less experienced agents. With any real estate transaction, there's all these forks in the road, right? And I would say any transaction, there's like 5 forks in the road. And at every one of those forks, you can take the wrong turn or you can take the correct turn and keep it on the tracks. So you got to get through those 4 forks and make the right choice at those 5 forks, or it's not closing. It's generally that simple. So you got to be real careful, and sometimes it's humbling, and you just have to kind of sit back and you know make sure that you're considering all the variables, that you're not getting confrontational before you have all the information. Don't be afraid to say things like, let me check with my broker. Let me check with the attorney. Let me check with my clients. And that I think is most commonly the mistake that people make. So multi-offers are definitely back. I mean, they're definitely ramping up a little bit. The last 2 that I submitted was 9 offers on a condo, which isn't terrible. It was a very low price point condo. And then, the house I just did this past week was 7 offers. They ended up with a cash offer at a pretty decent price point. So that's kind of like, yeah, I mean, that one's going to win. So, but that's higher than we've seen in a while. The past 6 months has been pretty quiet. So, that's definitely, indicative of a market that's peaking a little bit. There's a seasonal aspect to this too. I mean, it's spring market is approaching. So, a lot of it is seasonal. I did look right before I started the podcast. Rates as of today are at 6.25 on a 30-year. When I did this last week, they were at 5.99. I said this last week is that's not really an indication of anything, because the rates are generally trending down. But when they trend down, there's going to be little peaks throughout. So, I think it's a little bump, but I think that if you ask any, mortgage expert, that's not me. I'm not a mortgage expert. We're trending down. I think that the general consensus is that we'll be around 5.5 around late spring, and hopefully trending towards 5 to 4.5 at the end of the summer. These are all educated guesses. They're not my educated guesses, because that's not the area that I'm an expert in. And they could be wrong. Obviously, if people could predict mortgage rates, then, they'd be extremely wealthy. But, they're educated guesses. They're people that I trust. So I think generally we've seen that. I mean, rates were up around, up above 8 not too long ago. So it does seem to be moving in the right direction. I will say too, that we're never going to get back to those 2 and 3% rates that we saw during COVID, most likely. Again, from what I'm told, I'm not the expert here, but we'll never see those 2 and 3% rates. So, I think people are just kind of realizing it, and the market is kicking back up. We do also have this backlog, right? When the rates all went up from 8% to, they went from, mid 5s to 8 over the course of a few months. People just paused, everyone, including sellers. So, and I think, in my opinion, that lasted about 6 months. Again, speaking kind of anecdotally there, but I think that freeze happened for about 6 months. And then all those people, that 6 months, those people built up and built up and built up. And now, like, for the most part, everyone's kind of got the green light again. And that's why the market's getting busy again. So I do also think it might balance out pretty quickly. But if you're a seller and you're thinking about selling, I would jump on it right now. Again, that's just my educated guess as to what to do. Should you wait for the spring market? Should you do it now? I'd say do it now. People are ready to go. I have many buyers that are out there trying to find a house. They're just waiting for the house. They are all ready to go. They're just waiting for the house. If you're that house, there's probably a lot of buyers waiting for it. So I have 2 coming on the market in the next few weeks. I do expect them to go very well in both situations. I'll be thrilled if my sellers get more than we're asking. I try to price everything at market value for a very specific reason of that's what I think is fair. The mistake that I think people make a lot in these heightened markets is listing too high. That is not how you get a high price. If you have a house, let's say that I tell you that I would put it on the market for $599. You say, Craig, forget about it. I know what these houses are getting around here. I want to do $650. Now, listen, I've given you a price that, in my expert opinion, based on comps and numbers and the market and everything else, that's the number I'm giving you, that I expect it to, not necessarily what I expect you to get, but what I think is the best price to put it on the market for. You do not want to price too high. That's the biggest risk. If you price too low, that's not a risk. That doesn't mean you're just going to get that offer. It just means that you're not alienating anyone. because the buyer looks at it as, and I know some of my buyers, if I polled all my buyers right now and I said, if I send you a house with a listing price, do you expect to pay more or less than that listing price? At the end of the day, do you think this house is going to close for more or less than the listing price? They're all going to say more, obviously. So if you list a house that I told you to list at 599 at 650, how many people do you think are looking at that house and be like, oh, they're already listed at 650, it's going to go for 7? That's not a good idea as a seller. Wouldn't you rather list at 599 and get to 650 when a bunch of people visit it, fall in love with it, see that there's a lot of people looking at it and say, you know what, we didn't want to go this high, but we really love that house. Let's just throw the 650 at it. That's how it goes. I mean, that's our market right now. So I do have 2 listings coming up where, listen, I want to tell people all day that they'll get all the money they ever hoped for, because they saw the number on Zillow, and I'd love to get them that number, but that number is not real. So, I give them a different number and they're like, oh man, this is definitely lower than we expected. I said, I don't think this is the number you're going to get. I'm just telling you, this is the number you're going to put it on the market for. Because that's just how it is now. People are going to bid. But that doesn't mean that we list it at what we think their max bid is going to be. We've had a lot of problems in this market in the past with certain listings where there's a fair amount of deals that fall apart these days, and that mostly is because people are bidding so high, and then they go to inspections, and the inspection doesn't go perfectly, which no inspection goes perfectly, and then they are a little heavy-handed in negotiations, and then the seller gets irritated, and the buyer gets irritated, and everyone runs away. Those generally, knock on wood, do not happen on my deals because I'm very hands-on with that kind of stuff. But again, if you have an experienced agent, those things happen all the time. So we have these situations where a house is on the market, it gets bid up. Again, let's use the 600 example. So let's say it's on the market for 600, it gets bid up to 650, it sells. They have an agreement in place, they do the inspection, lender doesn't follow through, or they don't qualify when it goes to underwriting, or it doesn't appraise, or whatever. The 650 deal is now dead, right? So what does the seller do at that point? Put it back on the market for 6 or 649? My guess is, I don't know what most people would say, because I have the advantage of being a real estate expert, but I think most people would say, yeah, well then, yeah, you put it back on the market at 6, I think. But what ends up happening a lot of times is people put it back on the market for the last accepted offer they got, which was 649 in this case, the winning bid in a multi-bid situation. Well, guess what? You put it back on the market at 650, which is higher than your original listing price. So when people go look at your listing, they're like, these people raised the price of their house 50 grand. Why? What did they do? And then I make that call myself and I say, hey, I just saw you guys relisted and you're 50 grand higher. Did you do something? Did you put in a brand new septic system? Is there a new roof? Did you put a pool in? Like what's happening? Why is it 650? Oh, well, that's the last accepted offer we have. And I'm like, did that offer hold together? No. All right. Well, that doesn't mean a whole lot. Wouldn't you put it back at 6? That caused you to get 20 offers. So, and then those houses inevitably end up sitting for months on end. And it's just not a good practice. It just doesn't work that way. It just goes to like, and look, like, again, I have the advantage of being, in this all the time, but if I wasn't, maybe I would think, well, that makes sense. Put it back on the market for 650. That's what you had an accepted offer for. But here's the thing is, like, I see it all the time. Like I have empirical evidence behind what I'm saying. I'm not just speculating here. So like when I have those conversations with buyers and sellers about what we see all the time, as someone who transacts a decent amount of real estate, I get the advantage of just seeing everything that happens out there, not to mention, being in the office all the time and hearing stories, and we mastermind things all the time at the office here. I actually lead our biweekly mastermind here. And we have these discussions so we can kind of keep an eye on what's going on in the market. So, I think I happen to be working with 2 sellers right now that are so reasonable. It's so refreshing because they really appreciate what I have to say to them. But every once in a while, we do have a buyer or seller that can be stubborn. And listen, you don't have to listen to me. I'm not guaranteeing that I'm always right. But like I said, at least I have some experience and numbers and statistics and reports to back what I'm saying. So, it's wild out there. It's definitely, we're definitely, kind of at a fever pitch at the moment. I do think it'll balance out a little bit. But I think we're probably in for another heightened market, probably for the next 8 to 10 months. I continue to tell people, do not take your eye off the ball. That is the most important thing you can do. Is the people that have won, that are my clients that have won in the past 2 years, are the people that kept their eye on the ball. Don't take it personally when an offer doesn't get accepted. Don't take it personally if, showing activity is down on your listing. We'll fix it. We will get it right. But don't fall in love with the home if you're a buyer until I say, hey, offer accepted, we're in, because it could take a few swings before we hit it out of the park. So, but the people that I think have missed out on opportunities, and I have a few clients in mind where the perfect home did come up. I looked with them for so long. I had a really good idea of what they were looking for. The perfect one came up, but they had kind of gotten themselves out of the game, said, oh, you know what, Craig, this is too much for us. We're going to put it on hold. And listen, I get it, because it is very emotional. You fall in love with a house and then it gets yanked out from under you. You're not getting it. And then you go look at another one, maybe you fall in love with that one, it gets yanked out. Or a lot of times out here is like people just can't find a house. So they just keep looking at houses, and it's discouraging because they don't like any of them. But the people that have kept their eye on the ball in this market and just kind of slogged through and looked at, 6 houses. Listen, I don't mind taking my time to look at 6 houses with you, but it's that 6th one. They're like, oh, wow, this is the one. This is the one we've been looking for. And we put in our offer, and they don't have a cash offer, and we make it work. So it's definitely a bit of a roller coaster market out there right now, and you do have to stick keep your eye on the ball and stick with it. But the people that are doing that are getting rewarded, and the people that are sitting on the sidelines, listen, if you sat on the sidelines for 2 years right now, I don't think you're happy about what's happened with home prices. So like everyone that, I had so many people tell me over the past 2 years, like, we're going to wait out until prices come down. Prices aren't coming down. That's not really a thing. So they might flatten. The growth might slow down. But like, if you're waiting for like a $600,000 house to suddenly be 525, it's not happening. At least we just never have seen it historically. There's no evidence of it. Again, going back to my previous statement, there's just no evidence that that's going to happen. So, why take your eye off the ball? There's you get a pre-approval, unless you have a very distinctive change in your finances, and it might be a positive one. You might have got a promotion or something, but if you change careers or you lose a job, or you had a big situation at your current house and you had to put out 60 grand or something like that, unless you have some major change to your finances, that pre-approval is basically evergreen. It's nothing but a phone call to a good lender to say, hey, we're shopping again, get that pre-approval up and running. There's really no expiration on them or anything. So if you are serious about getting a house, this is what the process looks like now. Get your pre-approval in place, have it in your back pocket, keep your eye on the market. You're going to be in it for a little bit longer. This used to be what sellers had to do. If they were selling a house, they'd put it on the market, and it would be on the market for 4 months. And that was perfectly normal. That was the process. Now it's on the buyer side. If you are shopping for a home, get your pre-approval in place. Trust that the process may take 4 months, or it could be a week. It's just a matter of like keeping your eye on the ball. And you might get that home in a week, and you might get it in 4 months, and you might get it somewhere in between, but hang in there and stay persistent, stay patient. Don't fall in love with anything. Try not to get emotional, and you'll land where you want to land. I've yet to have a client that has struck out. So that's what it is. Multi offers are back. They never really left. They're just heated again. So that's kind of the current state of affairs. Again, if you are a seller, you hold all the cards these days. Just how it is. Be careful with those. Again, this is a public forum, so I don't want to be dropping quotes that are going to get me in trouble. There's a famous website out there that provides a estimate for your house. If you just Google your house with that website word, they'll just give you an instant value. It's their patented way of giving you that value. That number is fiction. I can tell you pretty confidently. Listen, they might get lucky every once in a while, but if you look at that number and you think, whoa, we can get that for our house, the answer is probably no. You probably have a pretty good idea of what your house is worth. And if you're looking at that number and using that as a variable and determining what your house is worth, it's incorrect. Now, if you get your house appraised because you're doing a HELOC loan or you're doing a refinance or something like that, that's actually the number that's probably going to come in. Or you're insuring it and you want it, you're talking insured value. Yeah, that number is probably pretty close to what that number will be on an appraisal. But in terms of selling it, that's not the number. It just isn't. Even in all this craziness and all the bidding and everything else, that number is most likely fiction. If you really want to know what your house is worth, have a real estate expert come into your house and give you a market analysis. Market value is not appraised value. So appraisals are almost always higher. And all the craziness over the past few years with people offering 100,000 over asking, the house is still appraised because that appraisal value is pretty accurate. You think of it as like a replacement value. If that house suddenly was knocked to the ground and you had to rebuild it, that number is probably an accurate number. So be careful with that as sellers. But other than that, I mean, the only thing I can guarantee people these days is, look, if you're thinking about selling a home right now, there's been no other time in real estate history where I could tell you that you're going to get top dollar for your house. There's no reason to anticipate that there will be a better time to sell a house as things go. And this has been going on for years. Like, it's not changed. So I think we're still going to be in a seller's market for quite a while. And, if you're buying and you're worried about like paying too much for a house, if you're staying there for 5 to 25 years, you're good. I mean, real estate generally appreciates. Have there been a few exceptions to this? Maybe, like, the people that bought in, like, the 2006 to 2008 area, they're really only now getting opportunities to sell it for what they bought it for. But they also lived there all this time, rent free. I guess that's relatively speaking, rent free. Obviously, they're not living there free, but they're not paying rent to someone else. They're putting equity in that house. But if they've been living there since 2008, that's 15 years. Then they're still going to be okay. They probably aren't happy with how it went, but this is the first market where they could have possibly made that money back. And that really doesn't pertain to everyone that bought back then. It's really the people that may have paid too much then, now have an opportunity to make that money back because of the way the current market is. But for generally speaking, if you purchase a house now, there's a reasonable expectation that if you're going to be there for 5 to 25 years and anywhere in between, that your house is still going to appreciate. It's not like, but if you're looking to sell in like 2 or 3 years, that could be a little more challenging because you got to factor in closing costs and maintenance costs and all that stuff. And, it might be tough to make your money back, but, sellers hold all the cards for now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And, someone's got to hold the cards. It's very rarely just a balanced market. It's always kind of pendulum and back and forth between buyer and seller market with, short periods in between where it's relatively balanced. But it is what it is. So, Chris, I see a question on there. Sorry, I just noticed it. It was pretty a long time ago. Good question. Now I'm gonna put this up there. So, Chris, don't know how you manage all those clients at once. Yeah, it's a good point. So I'll tell you. First of all, I work like crazy. Second of all, so I have this, Chris, I know it's the first time you're watching, but I have this board over here. It's like a whiteboard with all my clients on it. And so when I look at that board, and the reason I put it on a board in addition to having it in my CRM is because I have the schedules next to them. Some of those people are a year out. Some of those people are 6 months out. Some of those people are actively looking. I would say of the people that are actively looking, probably 4. And then beyond that, it's kind of like laid out a pipeline of people that are going to be doing stuff at a later time. On the selling front, I mean, for, listings, it's generally the work is much easier to schedule. Obviously my phone rings off the hook when I have listings, but the actual work of times I need to be in a place and doing things is much easier for me to time block. Whereas with buyers, it's much more like something pops up and we spring into action. So that can get a little more complicated. But currently, I'm only driving a few. Well, I shouldn't say driving them around. I don't drive anyone around anymore. But driving around with people, there's only 2 or 3. And you may have some insight to that. But I appreciate the question, Chris. Thank you. Not enough people ask questions on here. I get most of my questions afterwards. Actually, it's very funny. No, Chris, I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that. And it's a good question because I do, like, a lot of times I kind of talk about how many clients I have, and I wonder if people think, well, I don't want to be his client because he doesn't have time for me. And that is never the case. In fact, Chris, it's very funny that a lot of times my friends don't approach me because they're like, oh, we're just buying a, $275,000 condo. We don't want to bother Craig. And I over the years, I've had to be so careful to constantly remind them, like, I am never too busy for anyone, and I would love your business, and that's how I stay in business. And I got a family to feed, and I can handle it. I have plenty of bandwidth, and if I don't have enough bandwidth, I will hire an assistant. And at various times in my career, I've had assistants or minimally virtual assistants to kind of help me take some of the stuff off my plate and go out and do the stuff I need to do. So it's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it because I get to explain it. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's crazy out there. But listen, if you have if you're working with someone who can handle it and you're confident they can handle it, then there's nothing really to worry about. It's literally the same conversation we've been having for 2+ years, basically since COVID started, because if anyone remembers, like, it's hard to like remember the years since COVID because they all kind of blend together. But right before like COVID happened, the market went crazy. It actually happened right before COVID, like literally like a month or two before COVID, the market went nuts. And then COVID happened. And when everyone, shut down and was shacked up, we as real estate agents were in hyperdrive because nothing stopped for us. So for like the longest time, like before there were like vaccines and like people were being really, really careful, like still wiping. Remember when we were all wiping down our groceries and stuff like that? I was working full time. I was the only one in my family leaving the house. And even like my in-laws and stuff were a little uncomfortable with the fact that I was just like running around and stuff. And, it's really been crazy since then. It's just kind of like, within that realm, it's just peaks and valleys. And we just got out of a valley. Now we're heading for another peak. So, but yeah, it's good. Listen, I love what I do. So I guess I'm a little more immune to it than others, but it's an interesting profession for that very reason. It's definitely exciting. There's days when I'm on my phone, basically nonstop with taking, negotiation conversations and clients that are looking questions from buyers. First time buyers is a big pride point for me. I'm very happy to educate them, and I'm happy no matter what I'm doing to take that call and walk them through it. And if it's not a good time, I'll tell them when it is a good time. So, yeah, Chris, that's the way to do it, Chris. So actually, I know you looked at my YouTube channel. There's actually a video in there about like what kind of buyer are you, and you guys are a perfect example because I know you send me stuff a lot. So for anyone else that's watching, Chris is a client of mine, and we're talking about his process. There's two types of buyers, right? There's a set of buyers where I really have to be hands-on with them and I have to send them every listing. And if I don't send it to them, they'll never see it. And then there's the majority of clients these days are the people that use Zillow and have safe searches, and they get my emails too and they check them, but they already saw it on Zillow the night before. That's the majority of my people. And again, the people that win in this market are the people that are like you, that are just using the other apps and constantly keeping an eye on things. It's not like it's a huge advantage, like no one else is doing that. Everyone does that, but it definitely helps. And sometimes like with my clients, I'm copied on the listing emails that go to them. So I see, like, when Chris's name pops up in my morning email, I see what houses were sent to Chris based on his search parameters. And I look through them and see if there's something that I see that would be, this would be good for what they like. But also if I know that Chris is back home looking, every night on Zillow and checking homes, then it's super helpful to me because then he can just send me that. I can start doing due diligence instead of just kind of looking at listings. The value of a realtor is not in that search process because for the most part, 98% of it is every single realtor and every single person in the general public can see the same homes. We all have access to the same homes. 2% of it is like there could be exclusive deals and stuff like that. And that's kind of a separate thing, but that's literally like 1 or 2% of the deals that any realtor does in a given year. I shouldn't say any, some kind of focus on that. And that's a whole nother conversation. But for the most part, it's like 1%, 1 or 2% of deals. So that's, we can all do that. So that's obviously not my value as in my profession of finding the home. I can help with it if I need to, and I can certainly advise on it and do due diligence stuff. It's everything that comes after that. It's like once we've visited and selected the home, then it's the offer process. And then even once the offer is accepted, it's holding the deal together and getting it over to the finish line, which is basically just project management at that point and negotiation and stuff like that. So I appreciate, Chris, like you guys send me stuff all the time, and I have other clients that are just like you. Most of the clients are like that, is they're just sending me stuff, and then I can kind of, take it from there, so to speak. So that's how it's definitely changed, because I know when my parents moved to Clinton, where I'm sitting now, in 1970, they walked to the local, real estate office, and they brought out a flip book, and you literally like flipped through like Polaroid pictures of local homes. And if you liked it, you got in the car with your realtor and they drove you to the home. You say yes or no, and then you go back to the office and you look through more flip books. So obviously it doesn't work like that anymore. So the value of a realtor is not up front. And I actually lose clients a lot, because I shouldn't say a lot, but I've lost clients because they're like, Craig, you're not sending me anything. And my answer to you is, there's nothing to send you. I know what you're looking for, and we're all set up that if it hits the market, it'll immediately be sent to you, but there's nothing. So you can realtor hop, but like, did you really want to stop doing business with me? If, considering my negotiation style and everything else that I offer as a realtor, just because you're going to go to the next realtor who has access to the exact same houses, and you don't know how that person does business. So again, Chris, like another like really important conversation that I'm having a lot. So, but I appreciate you. I appreciate you chiming in. It's fun when people comment, because I don't have to keep rambling on about God knows what. So, but I'm going to check out. I'm going to head home and get some pizza, see my girls, and call it a day. So again, let's go Birds. If you're a fan, if not, I apologize. Don't let that, prevent you from doing business with me. It's just, that's one of my first loves, amongst a few. So, all right. So yeah, if you have any other further questions, phone numbers right here, call it, text it, whatever. I always tell people, if you text me, you can text me 24 hours. If I'm sleeping, I won't hear it. So don't worry about it. But I am a night owl, so I'm up late. Email me, craigmetz@kw.com. You can text me, call me, email me, or put a comment on any of the places this is broadcasting to, which is multiple Facebook and YouTube, and LinkedIn. So, and I will check those messages. So hope everyone has a good weekend. Stay safe, and go Eagles. And I'll see you all next Friday. Thanks so much. Later.